Welcome to another episode of Hutch on Hunting. Actually, I should say another episode of the first episode of SD Tuna hashtag 200. Folks, what you don't know about Hutch on Hunting is I've been hunting big game since 1968, killed my first deer, but I caught my first trout on a fly when I was 10 years old. So that was approximately 68 years ago.
Jeez,
So
Hutch.
I've been a fisherman way before I was a hunter. And it's just a privilege to me to have Michael Fowlkes on the show today. Who's Michael Fowlkes? Well, he's iconic in the outdoor industry because he was the first videographer that jumped on these big boats out of San Diego, the long range fleet. And I think we just talked about Deep Color, Tommy Rother's boat, Polaris Supreme. That was the first film, and I have a copy of that in VHS.
Yep.
So Michael grew up in Virginia, lived in Upper New York, and then 1959 headed to Southern California. And as they say, the rest is history. So, Michael, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Hutch. It's a pleasure to be here, sir.
Yeah, it's fun, and I got a hold of Michael because I have another Michael, good friend here in Colorado Springs. I was talking about a different thing. He said, "You fished a lot offshore." I said, "Yeah, a little bit. Caught a couple of fish." And he says, "Well, I got this friend, Michael Fowlkes, that's developing this project, History of Sport Fishing." So I said, "Let's get in touch with him." I'm going to talk to Michael Fowlkes, and folks, he is that much of an icon. He's humble and everything, but what he's done to promote offshore fishing, all the boats, all the people, you're going to hear the name Bill Poole and Frank Lepresky and Ray Rose. And I mean, there's hundreds and hundreds of guys. But Michael, with his cameras back 20 years ago, 30 years ago, jumped on these boats and did the best he could to produce content that got guys like me in the wintertime saying, "Man, I want to go on June Heat." Now, June Heat on the Red Rooster
Yep. Yep.
with Andy Gates, and it's June Heat down, in the tropics, and you're burning up, but you're stuffing the boat with fish.
Yep.
So we
Yes.
could go on and on talking about everything. But Michael, let's jump right in and let's talk about why the history of sport fishing was created.
Well, like yourself, Hutch, I've fished since before I could walk. My earliest memories are, I was 5 years old with my dad and my grandfather, and my dad hooked something, and I said, "You're stuck on the bottom. You're stuck on the bottom." His rod was bent all the way over, and I'm thinking, "That's the bottom." And he goes, "No, it's not. It's a fish. Like there's nothing that could pull that hard." And sure enough, he had about a 5-pound bass, and it was the biggest fish I'd ever seen in my life. And I'll just never forget the fact that I was shocked that something could pull that hard on the end of a rod. So I've been fishing my whole life. I've loved it. Moved out here when I was 9, started working on the sport boats, as a pinhead. And it's been a part of my life since I can remember. And then, having produced the Inside Sport Fishing series for almost 30 years here on Fox Sports West, I'd always had in the back of my mind that there was a documentary in here somewhere on the birth of big game fishing. And when I found out that the first tuna, the first marlin, and the first broadbill swordfish ever captured in the world on a rod and reel were all captured off Catalina Island, it just sort of a light bulb went off. And I said, I gotta tell this story. So my original vision was to basically the endless summer meets Ken Burns. Take sport fishing, put a little bit of energy into it like a surf film, and then talk about the history. So I was able to get a few of my family and friends together, and we raised enough money to say, all right, let's do this project. And it started off as a vision for a 75-minute movie on the birth of big game fishing. And as it evolved, we started talking to people like the International Game Fish Association, Trout Unlimited, Bonefish and Tarpon Trust, the American Museum of Fly Fishing, the American Sport Fishing Association, just SAC, everybody that we get our hands on, we talked to about the project, and nobody had any money. Nobody wanted to put up any money to do it, but they did say we could open our vaults to you, that we would give you access to our libraries. And when that floodgate opened, it changed from being a 90-minute film to what it is now. It's evolved into a 12-hour, 12-part documentary series covering everything from the first known recorded painting of a fishing reel in 300 what was it, AD, and the song Dynasty of China was the first picture of a known reel, all the way through until what the sport is today. So we've blended the history of the sport throughout the series with contemporary action and footage, and showed the evolution of the sport and how it basically evolved from an act of survival. I mean, people fish to survive, just like they had to hunt, learn to farm. You fish for survival. And there was no leisure time back in those days. I mean, nobody had time to go out and recreate. You just had to work, and fishing was part of the work, part of living. And then to see it evolve from an act of survival into the sport that it's become today, it's just been a phenomenal journey. And this film truly captures the essence of what the sport's all about, how it's evolved from an act of survival into a camaraderie with family and friends, and something that you connect your soul to the nature. It's just I love the sport. I love to fish, and I've just been honored to have had the privilege of putting this package together into what it's become.
And when we first started talking, we struck some common chords about our reverence for the water, where the fish live, and the ocean, and the whole environment. And I think that's one of the big things, as I previewed the film, is that you touched on so well, is that we're all connected. And then the world we live in right now, it's, it's upside down and crossways, and just
Yeah.
don't listen to
Yeah.
the news. But when you get out fishing and the sun setting or the sun rising, it's an incredible experience. Could you just vocalize that experience that you put into the movie, how we're connected?
Well, you said it perfectly there, Hutch. I mean, the world's in chaos right now. It's upside down, and fishing is a way to connect not only to nature but to your soul. There's a oneness there when you're, like you said, when you're watching a sunrise, or when you're watching a sunset, or just watching a hatch on the river, or a school of bait foam up underneath some tuna or whatever, or some. It's just when you're in touch with nature, you're in touch with your soul. And I think fishing is an excuse that we use to get out and do that. It's like, you and I aren't going to say, hey, Hutch, let's go for a walk on the beach and hold hands. But, let's go down to the beach and do some surf fishing. So there's a bond there between people that fishing allows you to commune and communicate within and without, from your soul. It's hard to put into words. And so many people today, I think, are out of touch with nature. They're out of touch with the touchstone of what world living and being a part of this planet's all about. And we've it's a sterilization almost of our human beingness. And I feel like fishing connects us back to nature in a way that very few things in life can do. And it's something that, like you said, you started when you were 9, 10 years old. You teach a kid to fish, it's something he's going to enjoy doing, or she's going to enjoy doing for the rest of their lives. So the gift of fishing is something that's been a part of my life since I can remember. It's been a part of American culture and the American landscape since the earliest colonists came over here and started fishing bass back in Kentucky, or striped bass up in Nantucket. We've fished as a country since the beginning of this country's birth. And there's an extremist group out there right now that feel like humans should not interact with nature in any other way other than as an observer. And they've got millions of dollars behind them funding an attempt to abolish fishing, to make fishing an illegal act. And there's 50 million of us every year here in this country that actually purchase a fishing license. So 17% of the American population buys a fishing license on an annual basis to have the privilege of being able to take a rod in hand. And I think, and most of us, I know for me, it's as true as anyone else's, I call it a wheelhouse mentality. When I get ready to go fishing, I care about my gear. I care about my rods, my reels, my baits, you know, my boat, how am I going to get there? Just, you know, I'm focused on what I need to do to get out there on the water and have a good time. I'm not really concerned with what's going on around me. It's just, it's an opportunity to zero in and focus on something that's important to me. I think most of us do that as individuals, but we really need, as a community of outdoor recreational activities, that we bond together, and that we have got to, we've got to establish with our legislation and the people that represent us in government that this is a sport that enriches the environment. Fishermen have been conservationists since the beginning of time. We're on the water. We realize how important clean water is, how important healthy fisheries are. And, you know, I go back to a phrase: you cannot hurt a fishery with a rod, reel, and a piece of string. Can't do it. But you take hundreds of thousands of hooks and gill nets and long lines and high seas drift nets and inshore small mesh gill nets and trawls. You take that type of commercial gear and you're raping the oceans to a point of extinction. And if we don't distinguish between commercial harvesting and sport fishing with our lawmakers, this sport could seriously be in trouble. A couple of people in Washington we've talked to said, listen, that bus has already left the station. And if fishermen don't wake up and realize that we need to bond together by joining, you know, American Sport Fishing Association or Trout Unlimited or CCA, whatever group, whoever you want to be associated with, but let your voice be heard. As an angler, right now, it's imperative that we let our voices be heard. And part of the message in this film is to try and show people that don't fish what a wonderful sport it is, and how fishermen are not the problem. We're really part of the solution to the environmental issues we're facing.
And I'll throw on the economical impact globally that fishing allows businesses all around the world. I'm connected to a few friends, and we're looking at fishing, just targeting tuna out of Three Kings, out of New Zealand. Okay, that's a couple of bucks, folks. You just don't do that. That's about 3 long-range trips, 10-day trips. Okay, but we're doing that, one, because we want to travel. I want to see, I've caught a lot of fish down in the Rehavos Islands, which are basically closed now, off Mexico, off Puerto Vallarta. And, you know, I've caught stripers out of Montauk, Narragansett. And so I've been to some places. And so I'm going, what about if we do this? And because I want to see different parts of the country. So I pay some money. I go and have experiences in places I never would have gone because I'm not going to climb Everest. And I'm bringing myself, my checkbook, but I'm going to immerse in another person's land and learn about people. And my thought, and after I watched the movie, is fishing connects us all if we're fishermen, men, women, and kids.
Absolutely.
There's no disparity, except if they're on the rail, I'm going to help that kid, that lady, or they're going to help me land my fish. That's it.
That's it.
That's it. That's where it stops. And it doesn't matter how much money you make or don't make, your job, your title, your gender, all that stuff goes out the window.
None of it matters.
Because we don't care.
None of it matters.
We just don't care. If you're on the rail with me and Michael, you're already in the club, right?
You've taken a rod in hand, you're already in the club.
You're in the club.
Yep.
So there isn't any, oh, acceptance, not acceptance. I'm this, I'm that. Who cares?
It transcends all social, economic, and
Who cares?
nobody cares.
And, since we're kicking this around, we need more of that where people can just be people, just be who you are. I'm not going to judge you. Again, if you're on the rail, you're on the rail. So we're going to have a good time. We're going to land that fish. We're going to have some laughs and high fives. And we're going to enjoy the time. Period. That's it.
That's the oneness we were talking about with nature.
Yeah.
There's just the focus, all of your activity, all your mental activity, your emotional state, it all focuses into one point, and that's the presentation of a bait. It takes all your energy.
You got to focus. I've been busted so many times. I've been yelled at by the skipper. Follow your line.
Follow your line. Your feet aren't anchored to the deck. Walk around the corner. But it's like you said, fishing offers an opportunity to connect, like I said, to your soul, into the souls of other people, into the soul of this planet at its purest essence. And that's a gift that we don't see today everywhere. You don't see it on TV. You don't see it when you're, bumper to bumper traffic or at work. It's a grind. This life we live has some hard edges. And fishing is a way to kind of round out some of those edges or get around the corners and into some pretty beautiful meadows.
So real quickly, you got 12 chapters. Talk us through each of the chapters real quickly. Well, 30 seconds each. 30 seconds each.
It starts at the very beginning of time. We open with, the survival is, fishing for survival. We kind of introduce the sport as it came out of England. It's the first fly fishing in England, first books, first written materials. It takes us into the colonization of the United States. Interesting, the Schuylkill Fishing Club was formed by Benjamin Franklin, George Washington, Patrick Henry. I mean, the fathers of this country had a little fishing club where they could meet and discuss the Revolutionary War or the plans for the Revolutionary War under the guise of a fishing club.
And that was in Pennsylvania, folks, just for your history.
That was the Schuylkill Fishing Club, was the first formal fishing club in the country. And it was really formed by the American patriots who needed a place to hang out and create the Declaration of Independence, basically. So these are the guys that basically gave birth to the country. And they were, they fished. George Washington would carry a coarse fishing kit with him into battle. And so that's chapter one. And then chapter two, we start pushing the limits a little bit, and we introduce some of the concepts of, taking the bass tackle, the original Kentucky bass reels and striped bass equipment, down into Florida, where they started fishing some bigger tarpon. And there was, I think it was April 18th in 1886, I believe, Woods, a gentleman by the name of Woods, caught the first tarpon ever recorded officially. It was 86 pounds, big tarpon, and it made world news. And nobody had ever seen a fish caught that big before on a rod and reel. Nobody thought it could ever be done. And from there, the guys, completion of the Transcontinental Railroad, opened up the West, and they started fishing tuna out here in the late 1800s off Catalina Island. They were getting a lot of hookups, but they weren't landing any fish because they had no drags. They're using leather thumb strips, So when the first tuna was landed, the first tuna over 100 pounds was landed, I think it was June 1st, 1898. Frederick Holder, Dr. Holder, caught a 183-pound tuna, and that was really the beginning of the birth of big game fishing. He formed the Tuna Club of Avalon on June 15th, and that's sort of the official date. I'd say that, and then like I said, Catalina followed that up with a marlin a few years later and a broadbill swordfish about 10 years after that. And the first marlin, first swordfish, and first tuna ever caught on a rod and reel were taken off Catalina. So chapter 2 kind of introduces all that. And we go into chapter 3, and as the sport kind of evolved from offshore and really only accessible to the elite because of the cost, it was a gentleman's sport without a question. It started to spread up and down the coast. The long range fleet started to come into existence after the Second World War there with Bill Poole. Really was a pioneer for the San Diego based long range fleet. Just he and Ingrid done phenomenal things in terms of, building the San Diego fleet into what was once old schooners, old barges, into what it is today, which is state of the art sport fishing boats. I mean, you're talking 120-foot boats that are capable of going out to sea, traveling thousands of miles and supporting an entire ecosystem for months, weeks at a time. And then we jump back east and we show some big bluefin being caught, and then we jump into fly fishing and we talk about the evolution of fly fishing, and then fly fishing. And I look back at it, I started fishing out here when I was 9 and never really got to fly fish as much as I wish I had. Now, when I look back at that sport and what it is, it's a phenomenal sport. Probably the purest form of fishing there is with a fly rod. And then how that fly fishing kind of evolved into some saltwater fly fishing and became a huge, in Florida, especially in the Gulf Coast, fly fishing in inshore estuaries and shallows for the bonefish and the tarpon, permit and stuff. It's just a phenomenal sport. And then we jump into bass, and bass. Ray Scott had a vision back in the 1960s that bass should be on TV. He said bass fishing and sport fishing. And he started BASS in 1967, and everyone knows what bass fishing is today. It's a phenomenal sport. And then from there we jump into competition, obviously covering the bass tournaments, the Masters, the classics, and then into the saltwater arena for competition, always pushing the evolution of the sport, the evolution of products, the evolution of the rods and reels. And the final chapter, which I really feel like the whole film builds into this final chapter, which is the future conservation and the future of the sport. And as we pass the baton along to our children and grandchildren, what it's going to take to sustain not only the sport, but our fisheries and the health of our waterways and our oceans, and ultimately the health of our planet. So it's a pretty comprehensive series on a sport that I feel like it's going to get its due. I feel like we're finally giving sport fishing its due.
And folks, in my talks with Michael, this is thousands of hours and
Sure.
thousands of dollars he's invested as his legacy. He started 20, 30 years ago, putting film in a can, and now he's created something that's gonna outlive him for sure.
All
it's
of
gonna be a legacy because nobody else has done this. He mentioned Ed Burns, who's a well-known, iconic documentary guy, but Michael's the only guy that decided, okay, let's do this. And Michael's had some battles, personal, physical health battles, but he's through it. And as Michael and I have talked about, we came to the conclusion that one of the reasons he's still on planet Earth was to get this project done. And you might not believe that. I don't know where your faith is. That is out the window, but it drove him to complete this task and build this legacy for all people. And I'll go back to fishing on the rail. This is for all people. It's for everybody. And I'm excited to play just a teeny part and throwing this out there to my group and putting it up on YouTube. And being a part of the rollout for the history of sport fishing. Now,
I,
when's it going to roll out officially?
Hutch, I thought a year ago we'd be done, to be honest with you. I think right now we're targeting about June 15th, June 20th is our release date. It may be pushed back another month. It just seems like every step we get to the finish line, there's just one more set of chores that need to be done, one more set of polishing that has to go through it. But we're looking at probably, I'd say within the next 60 to 90 days, we've got a distribution agency working with us up in Los Angeles. They're presenting it to the Netflix people, National Geographic, the History Channel, Outdoor Life, ESPN, HBO, all the major
Yeah,
streaming.
everybody.
Everybody's looking at it. And it's funny, these guys that are executives, they've probably never been out of their office. They've probably never had a rod in their hand. They've probably never picked up a gun. These guys are executives. They're decision makers that don't have any connection to the outdoors, to the sport. So it's going to be a tough sell. And it's going to be interesting to see how they respond. One of the things that a friend of mine, Jim Packer, who happens to be the president of Lionsgate, he's head of film and television, domestic and international distribution for Lionsgate. He said, Michael, listen, I love the project, but it's a high risk project for us because it's never been done. We have no track record. We don't know what the audience is going to do to it. We don't know if they're going to respond to it. I'd suggest you look into doing what they did on a film called The Chosen, which is basically the story of Jesus. They put that film together as a group and they couldn't sell it. They couldn't get it placed. None of the networks would take it. They just said, no, it's just too weird. We don't want it. So they got together within their community and started selling it through an app directly. You could purchase it directly online, buy it on your phone, cast it to your big screen TV and watch it just like you'd watch any other TV series, but it was coming through their own personal app. So we're in the process. In fact, Mike Hutchinson, who introduced us, Hutch, is the guy that's putting all that together for us. So our idea for release is obviously we'd love to have Netflix or HBO or Showtime or ESPN or somebody pick up the series and run it as a series. I'd like to see it commercial free, obviously. So it'd be what they call subscription on demand, video on demand, streaming. And if that doesn't pan out, we're going to be able to make it available worldwide through the History of Sportfishing app. And you'll be able to just go ahead on the app, sign up. We're thinking maybe $29.95 for the 12 hours, whatever. I don't know. We haven't figured out a price point yet, but we'll make it available either directly or through a major streaming service, probably within the next 90 days.
All right. So we're going to do another in May. We're going to revisit this with Michael, History of Sports Fishing, and we're going to talk about, and we touched on it a little bit, the history, the present, and the future. We're going to dive more into that because what I want to do as a conservationist, I've been involved in hunting and conservation groups all my life. And this is one area that I never spent any time. I had some friends at the Billfish Foundation, and they've since passed away, so I'm not involved in that anymore. But I'd like to get involved and really open people's eyes, because in my mind, in my heart, people just need to come together, common ground, and as we call campfire conversations, where it doesn't matter who you are, how much money you have. If you're at that campfire, we're all equal, period. And it's the same thing that I saw when I went through all the chapters of History of Sport Fishing. It brings everybody together. And this is going to resonate with everything I say about History of Sport Fishing, because it goes from the past to the present day, and now we have to have a future.
Yes,
Because
sir.
I want my grandkids to have a future. I have all the gear in the world, so whatever they want to do. They don't have to go to Cabela's or any sporting goods store. Shark bait, shout out for Mark Smith there in Huntington Beach. But Mark, they'll never have to go to your store except to get new line. But
Uh,
that's my juice in this whole thing. And Michael and I become friends, and I'll do anything to support him. So, Michael, closing statements, because I gotta get to a certification to be a guide
yes,
um
sir.
for Healing Waters, Project Healing Waters, for veterans
That's
that
one of the
need, somebody to help them catch trout.
Project Healing Waters is a segment in the film that every time I see it, it brings tears to my eyes. I mean, I've
Yeah.
probably seen this segment 1,000 times as we put it together and cut it. But the Project Healing Waters is just, and also they have, it's just phenomenal what they're doing for these vets. I mean, it's just truly touches your soul. And my
Yeah,
hat's
and
off.
that's what I do. I'm a disabled vet myself, and I was asked about a year ago, and I finally got around to it, and so I'm going to get certified today.
Right
So,
on. Congratulations.
so closing thoughts while we wrap up.
I'd say the most important thing is join an association, contribute to someone or something that you care about. Healing Waters, American Sport Fishing Association, I think out of Washington, is probably the most universal. They're on the cutting edge of the political scene, that they are really invested in what's going on, not only locally, but across the country as well as globally, because what affects our rivers affects the oceans, and what affects the oceans affects all of us. So let your voice be heard. Join for $5, whatever. Just become a member of something that's a conservation-based, pro recreational fishing activity. Support the sport that you love. And if we don't, honestly, we're going to wake up and it's going to be an illegal act. And trust me, these guys, they don't have big numbers, but they have big money, and they've got very powerful, very smart attorneys, and they have an extremist environmental financial support, if you will, that they want to ban the sport. They want to make it illegal for you to take your grandson fishing or to take your granddaughter down to the river and catch a fish. They want to make that an illegal act. And if we don't stop them as anglers, it's going to be passed before we know it. So, step up, find an organization that you believe in. Trout Unlimited, American Sport Fishing Association, Keep America Fishing, Coastal Conservation Association, whoever, it doesn't matter. But just let your voice be heard. And I think that's a resounding message, because protect what it is that you love, protect the sport, protect our planet, and help protect your soul.
Thank you so much on behalf of ST Tuna, #200. This is Bruce Hutchins saying, we'll see you again soon.